Okay, so let's start the session. So in the morning we discuss about the simple inheritance we identified here. Now we'll try to discuss about the one of the another important concept to call multi-level inheritance here. Okay, what we need to understand basically here we are going to have multiple classes here. So for example, I'm having A class and B class as well as C class. So now you can see this is the A class I'm defining, and here I'm trying to define the B class, and here I'm trying to define the C class. So see the hierarchy how we are having here. Getting the point. So this is the hierarchy we are having. Now this is the topmost superclass. Getting the point. This is the topmost superclasses here. And another one, what we need to understand here, this is the our intermediate class here. Getting the point. So here, whatever the B class we are defining it, this is basically intermediate class here. Okay, and this is the our subclass here. And now, what we need to understand for this particular two classes, so B class is a superclass. Okay, B class is a superclass, and C class is basically it is a subclass. And for this particular two classes, and B is a subclasses here. Okay, this particular B is a subclass, and whatever this particular, every time A is a superclass here. Getting the point? Every time A is a superclass. So this is very important. We need to understand here, and this particular hierarchy we'll call it as a multi-level hierarchy. Okay, so multi-level hierarchy. This is very important information we need to understand here. How this particular multi-level hierarchy it is going to work. Getting the point? How this particular multi-level hierarchy it is going to work. So to come up with this particular multi-level hierarchy, how many classes we are having here? We are having three classes here. What are all the three classes? We are going to create a class, and we'll try to create a B class, and we'll try to discuss about the C classes here. So these three classes are going to use as a multi-level classes. But here, whenever we are trying to discuss about these two classes here, the B is the superclass, and for this particular A and B, A is a superclass, and this particular B it is going to play important role. This is we'll call it as a intermediate class, and this intermediate class basically what is doing internally. So one type it is trying to play as a super. For another type, basically, it is trying to play as a subclass here. Okay. For another type, it is trying to play as a subclass here. So now we'll try to understand the simple information about this particular multi-level inheritance. So how it is going to work. Okay. So let's cite the simple example how this particular multi-level inheritance is going to work. So for this particular example, we already identified the box and box weight class. Now I'm going to discuss about the one more class here. So this is very important class I'm discussing here. Okay. First, we need to understand the diagram. Here, how many classes we define? Three classes. Okay. A class, B class, and C class. Okay. Here we are having the relation between these three classes. Okay. Now again, I will explain the one more class. So now observe carefully. I'm going to create a one class here. First, I will create box class. The box class we already identified here. Getting the point? This is the super class we define. And another class, now we define the box weight. Box weight basically, it is trying to extend from this particular box class. And I'm going to create a one more class. I'm going to create a one more class here. So this particular class will play an important role. So that is called shipment here. Okay. So this is the shipment class I'm trying to create. Basically, what exactly this particular shipment class is doing internally, I'm trying to extend from the box weight class. Okay. I'm trying to extend from this particular box weight class. Now, what you need to understand here. Getting the point? How this particular hierarchy it is working. The topmost superclass we defined as a box class here, and internally we are trying to define box weight class, and the subclass we are trying to define as a shipment class. Okay, this is very important hierarchy we are discussing here. Okay, this particular box weight is going to play important role because this particular class we'll call it as a intermediate class here. Getting the point? This class we'll call it as a intermediate. Why we are calling intermediate? For this particular two classes, this box weight is going to play as a child subclass here. Okay. For this particular two classes, box and box weight, this class is going to play as a subclass. And for this particular two classes like shipment and box weight, and this box weight is going to play as a superclass. Getting the point? So here this class is playing super role as well as sub role here. Okay, so this is we need to understand. Now let's write the what are the properties we can write here. Now I'm trying to write the properties something like a private. Again, I'm trying to use the same double. Here I'm trying to write the cost property. Okay, here I'm defining one variable called cost here. Now what we will do basically, we'll try to create a constructors here. So how we are trying to create the constructor? Basically, the constructor should match with the name of the class. Now here what I'm doing here, this is the constructor I'm going to provide, and internally, so which is taking as a object. So here I'm going to call super. So this OB I'm trying to pass here, and later what I'm doing here, so this dot cost is equals to OB dot cost. Okay, this is the one constructor I'm defining. This constructor is expecting object as a parameter. Okay, so one more constructor I'm trying to define. This is very important. This particular constructor is expecting how many parameters? This constructor is expecting around 5 parameters. So why it is expecting the 5 parameter? Because first one is the width, second one is height, third one is depth, and fourth one is something like a weight property, and the fifth one cost I'm trying to provide. Okay, so this is the 5 parameters we are passing here. Getting the point? These are all the 5 parameters I'm passing, and I'm using the super keyboard, and I will try to use these are all the 4 parameters here. So width, height, and depth, as well as what is the fourth parameter, something like weight here. Okay, so this is the fourth parameters constructor we are calling. Finally, whatever we are having, I'm trying to set into this particular cost here. Okay, so this is the another constructor I'm defining. Now what we can do basically, if we want to define the default constructor. Getting the point? So these many the constructors I'm defining. Now you can call the default constructor here. You can call the default constructor, and we can provide the whatever the variable we define is something like a cost. So what you need to understand here, this is the hierarchy is very important here. Getting the point? So whatever the hierarchy we are creating, this hierarchy is important. Now shipment internally, it is extending from the box weight. This particular shipment is internally extending from this particular box weight here. Now what you need to understand, this is the constructor I'm trying to create, shipment, which is expecting object as a parameter, and this is the fifth parameter is constructor. So now you can see these are all the 5 parameters we are passing, and so I'm calling the superclass constructor. Getting the point? The superclass constructor is expecting how many parameters? 4 parameters. So here, which superclass constructor is going to call? Which superclass constructor is going to call? Something like this. So this is the constructor is going to call. And internally, what we are doing is we are trying to call the one more super. Now finally, whenever we are trying to create the constructor, whenever we are trying to call the constructor, first superclass constructor is going to call, later the intermediate constructor is going to call, and finally the subclass constructor is going to call. Okay, this is important, we need to understand. And where I'm trying to create object is, so here okay, so here I'm not creating any object yet. Maybe here we are trying to create box and box weight main. Now instead of creating this particular box weight, now what is the object I'm going to create basically here? Something like shipment. So why I'm creating the shipment here? Why I'm creating the shipment here? Because shipment is a subclass for all the two classes here. Getting the point? This is very important. We need to understand. Whatever this particular shipment we are calling here, this is the subclass of for all the whatever the two classes we created. What is the base class basically? Like what is a super class? Box is a super class. And what is the intermediate class here? Something like box weight. And finally, this particular shipment is a subclass here. Now what I'm doing here, I'm going to provide the all the values. So something like 12.4, 78.5, 96.3, okay, and 74.1, and so 85.2. How many values I'm passing here? Like 5 values I'm passing, because shipment is expecting 5 parameters constructor. Okay, this is the shipment class. And internally, what I'm trying to do here, sh1 dot sh1 dot. So you can access only, you can access the we cannot access the property directly. We are going to access the methods here. We are going to access the properties directly. Okay, observe carefully with help of this particular shipment object. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to call the all the methods. So what are all the methods we can call basically? Now you can see, so get width, height, getting the point, width, weight method, height method, and depth method. So along with this, we can call the value method. So the value method is trying to return from the where box weight class. Getting the point. Whenever I'm trying to call this value method, getting the point. Whenever I'm trying to call this particular value method, from which class it is trying to call here? So it is trying to call from the box weight class. So why it is calling from the box weight? This is very important basically. Okay, why it is calling from the box weight here? Because first, what happens internally, this is important. What is an object we created? Shipment object we created. So inside the shipment, first it will try to look up the value. Getting the point? First it will try to look up the value. Okay, inside the shipment right now, we did not define the value method. Okay, once we did not define, so now it will look up the hierarchy. What is the hierarchy we are having? Something like box, box weight, and shipment. So inside this particular shipment, we could not identify the we could not identify the value method. Now what happening internally? Now it is trying to move on to this particular box weight here. Okay, now it will try to look up the box weight. Inside this particular box weight, if we are having value method, it will call. Otherwise, now from here, it is trying to look up the value method inside the super class. If it is not available, what happens internally? At the compilation only, whenever we are trying to call this value method, it will try to give an error. But right now, it is not giving any error. Now what we need to understand basically, what we need to understand here, in some location, the value method is available. But observe carefully, this is very important. Here, I'm trying to create a shipment object. Okay, here I'm trying to create a shipment object, but what we need to understand, at the compilation time, okay, at the compilation time, it is not checking the value of the value method inside the shipment class. Getting the point? Now, earlier, what we identified here. So I will explain the one more example. Observe, here I'm trying to enable this particular section of code. Now, so carefully observe, here I'm trying to remove the box here. Whenever I'm trying to move this, here I'm getting 2 errors. Okay, here whenever I'm trying to modify this particular object to the super type, so this particular weight method as well as the constructor is getting an error. Now, what you understand here, inside this particular box class, the weight method is not available. Okay, it is clear because the weight method we define inside the box weight class. Okay, now whenever I modified this, we are getting an error that now we identified. But even though, if you observe carefully, inside this particular shipment class, right now we don't have a value method. But why it is not giving me an error? Getting the point? So inside this particular box class, if this particular method is not available, the compiler giving line number 12 an error. Same way, the shipment dot value method I'm calling, but inside the shipment class, we don't have a value method. We don't have a value method. Still, this value method is not giving me any error. Any reason why it is not giving me any error in the line number 14, and why we are getting an error same line number 12? So can you explain the differences between 14 and line number 12? What happening internally?
Sir, you used to in base class as a shipment. There you are using a box as a reference of the base class.
Okay. So if I'm using the base class reference, what happening? Here also we are using the base, and here I'm not using any base classes here. Okay, observe carefully what happening. Even though this value method is not available, so in the compilation phase also, get in the pen, in the compilation runtime, both the phases it will try to look up the method in the first one is the box weight and another one is box class. If the method is no longer available inside the shipment, but here what happening? Because so basically box is the super class here. Okay, box is a super class. So if the information, if this particular get weight method, if it is not available inside this particular box class, now what is another option basically here? It will try to look up the object class. It will try to look up the object class. Inside the object class, whether this particular method is available. So this particular method is not available here. Okay. So what we need to understand basically, this particular object class, this is the default super class for this particular box class here. Here we are not using any extends keyword. By default, this is the super class. Now, what we need to understand, inside this particular object class, whether this particular method is available, we are not going to get any error. But here, so this method is no longer available inside the box class as well as inside this particular object class. Because of this, it is giving me an error line number 12. But what about this particular shipment here? Inside the shipment is not available, but it is available inside this particular box weight. Inside this particular box weight. Even inside this particular box weight also, if it is not available, it will look up the box class here. Okay. So this is the hierarchy is very important. We need to understand here. Okay. Now observe carefully what we need to understand here. Any one of the case, if the object is not available, it will try to look up the super classes. For example, here what I'm doing is I'm trying to remove this like bw1 dot. I can call something like a toString method. Getting the point? I'm calling the toString method. Now observe carefully inside the box class. If I'm going to open any toString method is available here. Now you can see we don't have a toString method. So this is the constructor, this is the constructor, this is also constructor, and this is the one constructor, this is also constructor. Okay, so value method, square method, and set values method, and these are all the sum getters method. But here if you observe carefully, we don't have a toString method. Even though if you don't have a toString method, what happening internally? This particular toString, it is not giving me any error here. Why it is not giving an error? Basically because the toString, whatever the toString we are using, this is coming from the object class. So first what happening internally, it is trying to take the highest priority. It is trying to take the highest priority to go the box class. Inside the box class, if the method is not available, it will try to look up the object class here. Okay, same way this is also happening. Now what I will do, I will remove this particular value method from here. So okay, this is the value method I'm commented here. Getting the point. This is the value method I commented from this particular box weight class. Now still you can see I'm not getting any error. But when I'm going to get an error, whenever I'm trying to comment out this section. Whenever I'm trying to comment out this section, I'm going to get an error. Now you can see, now this is giving me an error. sh1 dot value method, now it is giving me an error. Okay, so this is very important. This is the way of calling the methods here. The hierarchy is very important here. Okay, any questions here?
Sir, can we see the object class, those class, means those object class, what are the methods of content?
So that we already discussed, right, in the last session. Okay, anyway, let me show you object class information here.
Okay.
Okay, so now you can see these are all the method. Now what is the method we called just now? ToString method. Okay, along with this particular ToString method, so we have some additional method. Like you can see, get class method we are having, hash code we are having, equals method we are having, clone method we are having, notify all, and these are all the some wait methods here. Getting the point. Now if you open this particular clone, it is a protected one. Getting the point. This is very important. It is a protected one. So we are, as of now, we did not discuss about the protected access modifier here. So I will explain how this particular protected access modifier is going to work. But right now, observe carefully what are all the methods we are having inside this particular object class here. Okay, these are all the methods inside these. How many methods we are having? We call the one method called ToString method. Okay. So any questions? Okay. Sai నీకు ఏమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉన్నాయా?
Pass weight value is 6946016.922 ఉంది. అది ఎట్లా వచ్చింది సార్? అది ఒకసారి ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేస్తారా సార్?
ఇదా? ఓకే, ఈ వాల్యూమ్ అనేది బేసిక్ గా ఓకే, ఈ అవుట్పుట్ ఇప్పుడు అబ్జర్వ్ చేసి ఇక్కడ బాక్స్ వెయిట్ వాల్యూమ్ ఈజ్ అని ఎక్కడ డిఫైన్ చేశాను. నేను ఈ బాక్స్ వెయిట్ క్లాస్ లో ఇక్కడ డిఫైన్ చేశాను. ఓకే, నా ఈ మెసేజ్ ఫస్ట్ ఈ మెసేజ్ సేమ్ మెసేజ్ ఇక్కడ ప్రింట్ అవుతుంది. ఓకే, బాక్స్ వెయిట్ వాల్యూమ్ ఈజ్. సో దాని తర్వాత ఇక్కడ నేను ఏం చేస్తున్నాను అంటే నేను మెథడ్లు కాల్ చేస్తున్నాను. సో గెట్ విడ్త్ మెథడ్, గెట్ హైట్ మెథడ్, గెట్ డెప్త్ మెథడ్, అండ్ దాని తర్వాత వచ్చిన రిజల్ట్ కి నేను మల్టిప్లై చేస్తున్నాను. ఇక్కడ ఈ వెయిట్ వాల్యూస్ లైక్ ఈ వెయిట్ ప్రాపర్టీకి ఏదైతే వాల్యూ ఉందో ఆ వాల్యూతో మల్టిప్లై చేస్తున్నాను. ఎప్పుడైతే నేను మల్టిప్లై చేస్తున్నానో ఆ రిజల్ట్ ని ఈ ప్రింట్ఎల్ఎన్ మెథడ్ ప్రింట్ చేస్తుంది. ఓకే, ఆ రిజల్టే ఇక్కడ ఈ మెసేజ్
మల్టిప్లై చేస్తాం సార్. మన నంబర్ ఇవ్వలేదు కదా సార్.
ఈ నంబర్ ఇక్కడ ఇచ్చాను కదా. సో ఎక్కడ ఇచ్చానంటే ఈ నంబరు ఇక్కడ ఇచ్చాను. ఇది సో ఇది ఎలా కాల్ అవుతుంది అంటే ఇంటర్నల్ గా లెట్ మీ ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ దాట్ ఆల్సో. నేను అందుకే మార్నింగ్ నుంచి లైక్ నిన్నటి నుంచి అదే ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేస్తున్నాను. షిప్మెంట్ అనే ఓకే బాక్స్ సేవ్ దిస్ అండ్ ఐ విల్ ఎనేబుల్ దిస్ ఆల్సో. ఓకే, సో కేర్ఫుల్ అబ్జర్వ్ హియర్. ఇక్కడ ఏం చేస్తున్నానంటే న్యూ అనే ఒక ఆపరేటర్ ఆబ్జెక్ట్ క్రియేట్ చేస్తున్నాను. ఇది మనం ఆల్రెడీ డిస్కస్ చేసుకున్నాము. ఒక కన్స్ట్రక్టర్. ఎన్ని పారామీటర్స్ ఉన్నాయి కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ కి? 1 2 అండ్ 3 4 5 పారామీటర్స్. 5 పారామీటర్స్ ఉన్నాయి. ఓకే, సో ఈ 5 పారామీటర్స్ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ నేను ఇక్కడ కాల్ చేస్తున్నాను. ఇప్పుడు ఏమవుతుంది? ఈ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ కాల్ అవుతుంది. ఓకే, సో ఈ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ బేసికల్కి 5 పారామీటర్స్ ఉన్నాయి. ఇంటర్నల్ గా ఏం చేస్తున్నాను? ఇది ఒక కీవర్డ్ డిస్కస్ చేస్తాను. నేను మార్నింగ్ డిస్కస్ చేశాను సూపర్ అని. ఓకే, ఈ సూపర్ కీవర్డ్కి ఎన్ని పారామీటర్స్ పాస్ చేస్తున్నాను? 4 పారామీటర్స్ పాస్ చేస్తున్నాను. సో ఇది ఎక్కడికి పోతుంది? ఇక్కడ నుంచి బాక్స్ వెయిట్ అనే క్లాస్ లో ఈ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ కాల్ అవుతుంది. ఓకే, ఇక్కడ ఏం చేస్తున్నాను? బేసిక్ గా అగైన్ నేను ఇంకొక సూపర్ కీవర్డ్ డిఫైన్ చేశాను. ఇక్కడ ఎన్ని పారామీటర్స్ పాస్ చేస్తున్నాను అంటే 3 పారామీటర్స్. ఓకే, సో ఇక్కడ ఈ సూపర్ కీవర్డ్ ఫైనల్ గా ఈ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ కాల్ అవుతుంది. ఓకే, సో నౌ ఇఫ్ యూ అబ్జర్వ్ బాక్స్ పారామీటర్ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ ద సేమ్ మెసేజ్ వీఆర్ ప్రింటింగ్ హియర్. ఇక్కడ సేమ్ మెసేజ్ ప్రింట్ అవుతుంది. దాని తర్వాత ఇక్కడ మనం వాల్యూస్ని ఇనిషియలైజ్ చేస్తున్నాం. ఎందుకంటే ఎప్పుడైతే సూపర్ కీవర్డ్ కాల్ చేస్తున్నానో వాల్యూ పాస్ చేస్తున్నాను. ఓకే, సో ఇఫ్ యూ వాంట్ టు అండర్స్టాండ్ మోర్, నేను ఇక్కడ బ్రేక్ పాయింట్ పెట్టి ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేస్తాను. ఓకే, సో ఇక్కడ బ్రేక్ పాయింట్ వచ్చి ఆగింది. నౌ ఐఎమ్ మూవింగ్ ఇన్ టు దిస్. సో ఎందుకు కాల్ అయింది అది? ఓకే, ఇక్కడ నువ్వు బేసిక్గా అబ్జర్వ్ చేస్తే ఈ షిప్మెంట్ అనే కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ కాల్ అయింది. ఎన్ని వాల్యూస్ ఉన్నాయి ఇక్కడ? ఈ వాల్యూస్ ఇక్కడ చెక్ చేసుకో. ఇక్కడ పాస్ చేశాను వాల్యూస్ అన్ని. సో 12.4, 78, 96, 74 and 85. So these many values I'm passing here. Okay, so these are all the values. You can highlight this. So width value this, and here height value and depth value, some way weight and cost here. All the values we can identify here. So after this, now what I'm doing here, I'm calling this super. Basically super is the first executable statement here. Okay, now I'm going to call this particular super. So carefully observe. Now I'm moving into the another class. So which class? Now we are inside the box weight class. Again, here now you can identify the values here. So this is the width I'm passing, and this is the particular height I'm passing here. Now 78.5, and finally I'm passing so some other values. So like width is a 96 and weight is a something like 74. And finally again we are calling one more super keyword here. Okay, so this particular super keyword, now it is calling this particular constructor. So this constructor we define inside the box class. So finally we reach the topmost super class. So this is the hierarchy we discussed just now. Basically this is the box class. Now it is connected with this particular box weight. Okay, and finally we connected with this particular shipment class. Now what is the calling of this particular all the classes here? From shipment to it is called the box weight. From box weight to now we are calling box class. So we'll try to execute the one by one here. Okay, so let's observe how we are executing this. So here I'm trying to print the one statement here. So the statement is now it is printing here, and later I'm trying to initializing all the values. So carefully observe what are all the values we initialize now. We initialize the width, height and depth values. Okay, so later where I'm going? Later where I'm going? From where this particular the constructor is called. From where this particular constructor is called here? From this particular box weight here. Now you can observe carefully. From line number 9 we call the constructor. So again we'll back to the line number 10 here. Okay, so carefully observe. From here line number 13 we'll go to the line number 10 inside this particular box weight here. So now observe. So earlier we call this particular super keyword. Now we come back to this particular line number 10. Now what I'm doing is, whatever the value we are having, this particular weight here, I'm trying to set into this particular property called weight here. Okay, so this is a way the values are setting. So once it is initialized here, now you can see what is the value right now we are having, 74.1 here. But how we are setting this? We call this particular constructor and we provided this particular parameter. Okay, so after this, after execution this line number 12, now we are going back to the shipment class. So this is the shipment class here. Now what we need to understand here? So again we are trying to set the cost here. So what is the cost we are setting here? Something like 85.2. Okay, finally we are setting the cost value. So once we set here, now what we need to understand here, like how we are calling the constructor, same way it will come back to the same line numbers here. So finally this is the calling hierarchy, and once it is reached to the super class constructors here, now it is coming back to the same way how this particular classes are called internally. Okay, so this is a way of calling this particular all the constructor. Once this particular constructors are called, now what we are doing is we are calling this particular value method. Whenever we are calling this particular value method, now what happening internally? Again we are going to see this particular value method where we define here. Basically we define this particular value method inside the box weight class. So here you can see the name of the class here, something like box weight. So here also we can easily understand here. So we are now inside the box weight. So which method it is calling? The line number 19 value method is calling. Okay. So after this, now what I'm doing, first I'm trying to print this particular statement. So once I print this particular statement here, now I'm trying to call the each method. Now I'm calling each method. Whenever I'm calling this particular each method, internally, what happening? It is trying to return the width here. Now you can see what is the value of this particular width it contains, 12.4. And what about this particular height here? Something like 78.5. And now you can see same way, depth we are having 96 here. Okay. So this is a way the value is already initialized with the help of this particular constructor. So which constructor we called here? So this is the constructor. Okay. So this is the constructor we used here to initialize the values. Okay. Finally, now with the help of this, we are trying to call all the methods. The each and every method, it will return the result here, and based on the result, it will try to multiply the value. Finally, it is printing the whatever the result we are getting here. Okay. So this is the way of printing the result here. So now, is it clear? ఇంకేమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉన్నాయా?
బాక్స్ వెయిట్ హైట్ ఉంటుంది కదా సార్, దాన్ని ఎట్లా క్యాలిక్యులేషన్ అవుతుంది సార్ నంబరు?
ఇక్కడ ఎట్లా క్యాలిక్యులేషన్ అంటే బేసిక్గా ఇక్కడ ఏం చేశాను, వాల్యూమ్ మెథడ్ని కాల్ చేస్తే ఏం చేస్తుంది, ఇక్కడ లైన్ నెంబర్ 19 ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ అయింది, దాని తర్వాత లైన్ నెంబర్ 20 ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ అవుతుంది. ఇన్సైడ్ ఈ లైన్ నెంబర్ 20లో ఏం చేశాను, బేసిక్గా ఈ మెథడ్ని కాల్ చేస్తాను. ఈ మెథడ్ని కాల్ చేసినప్పుడు ఈ వాల్యూ ఉందిగా, బేసిక్గా ఇది ఒక ప్రాపర్టీ డిఫైన్ చేసాం కదా ఇక్కడ మనం. సో ఇక్కడ ఈ 3 ప్రాపర్టీ డిఫైన్ చేస్తాం, విడ్త్, హైట్ అండ్ డెప్త్. సో ఈ వాల్యూస్ని ఎలా సెట్ చేశాను, ఈ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ కాల్ చేసి ఇక్కడ వాల్యూ సెట్ చేశాను. ఇది లోకల్ వేరియబుల్ అని డిస్కస్ చేసుకున్నాము, ఇది ద ఇన్స్టెన్స్ వేరియబుల్ మనం డిస్కస్ చేసుకున్నాము. ఓకే. సో దిస్ వేరియబుల్స్ విల్ కాల్ ఇట్ యాజ్ ఎ ఇన్స్టెన్స్ వేరియబుల్, అండ్ వాట్ ఎవర్ దిస్ పర్టికులర్ రైట్ సైడ్ వేరియబుల్ వీఆర్ హ్యావింగ్, దీస్ ఆర్ ద లోకల్ వేరియబుల్. నేను ఇప్పుడు ఏం చేస్తున్నా, ఈ లోకల్ వేరియబుల్ ఉన్న వాల్యూని ఈ వేరియబుల్లోకి ఇనిషియలైజ్ చేస్తున్నా. ఓకే. ఈ వేరియబుల్లోకి ఇనిషియలైజ్ చేశాను. సో దీని తర్వాత ఈ వేరియబుల్స్ ఎక్కడైతే వాడుకుంటున్నానో, ఎక్కడైతే యూజ్ చేస్తున్నానో, నాకు అక్కడ ఈ రిజల్ట్ వస్తుంది. ఇప్పుడు నువ్వు చూస్తే ఈ మెథడ్ కాల్ చేస్తున్నా, నేను గెట్ విడ్త్ మెథడ్ని కాల్ చేస్తున్నా. ఎక్కడి నుంచి కాల్ చేస్తున్నా, ఈ బాక్స్ వెయిట్ నుంచి కాల్ చేస్తున్నా. ఎప్పుడైతే ఈ గెట్ విడ్త్ మెథడ్ నేను కాల్ చేస్తానో, నాకు ఆల్రెడీ ఈ మెథడ్ ఈ వేరియబుల్లో వాల్యూ స్టోర్ అయ్యి ఉంది. ఎప్పుడు స్టోర్ చేశాము, ఎప్పుడైతే నేను ఈ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ని కాల్ చేశానో, ఇక్కడ ఎప్పుడైతే ఈ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ నేను కాల్ చేశానో, సో సేమ్ టైం ఆ వాల్యూస్ని ఈ వేరియబుల్లో స్టోర్ చేశా. ఎందుకు ఈ వాల్యూని స్టోర్ చేశాను అంటే, ఇది క్లాస్ లెవెల్లో డిఫైన్ చేశా. ఈ వేరియబుల్ అనేది డెప్త్, హైట్, రైట్ సైడ్లో ఉన్న వేరియబుల్స్ అనేది కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ లెవెల్లో డిఫైన్ చేశా. నేను అందుకే చెప్పా స్కోప్ ఈజ్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ అని. ఈ స్కోప్ ఇక్కడ ఓపెన్ చేశాను, ఇక్కడ క్లోజ్ చేశాను. ఈ రైట్ సైడ్లో ఉన్న వాల్యూస్, ఈ రైట్ సైడ్లో ఉన్న వేరియబుల్స్ ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో, ఈ 3 ఈ స్కోప్ వరకే యూజ్ అవుతాయి. ఓకే. ఈ స్కోప్ నుంచి నేను బయటకు వచ్చాను అంటే నాకు ఈ వేరియబుల్స్ అన్ని 0. ఓకే. ఈ వేరియబుల్స్ అన్ని 0 అయిపోతాయి, కానీ ఈ వేరియబుల్స్ మాత్రం 0 అవ్వవు. ఎందుకు ఈ వేరియబుల్ 0 అవ్వ అంటే, ఈ స్కోప్ ఇక్కడ స్టార్ట్ అవుతుంది లైన్ నెంబర్ 3లో, నౌ ఇట్ ఈస్ ఎండెడ్ విత్ లైన్ నెంబర్ 65. సో ఇది స్కోప్ అన్నట్టు. అంటే క్లాస్ లెవెల్ స్కోప్ వేరు, కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ లెవెల్లో ఉన్న స్కోప్ వేరు. ఓకే. అందుకని ఈ వేరియబుల్లోకి నేను ఇనిషియలైజ్ చేశా. ఎప్పుడైతే ఈ వేరియబుల్లోకి ఇనిషియలైజ్ చేశానో, బికాస్ నౌ వీఆర్ ఇన్సైడ్ ద సేమ్ స్కోప్, లైక్ ఈ మెథడ్స్ అనేది ఈ స్కోప్లోనే ఉన్నాయి, ఏ 65 లోపలనే ఉన్నాం, మనం అవుట్ సైడ్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ పర్టికులర్ 65లో లేము. సో ఆ వాల్యూ అనేది నేను యాక్సెస్ చేయగలుగుతాను. ఎప్పుడైతే ఈ మెథడ్ కాల్ చేశానో, ఈ వేరియబుల్లో ఉన్న వాల్యూ రిటర్న్ చేస్తుంది. వచ్చిన ఈ వాల్యూతో వచ్చిన ఇక్కడ సంథింగ్ నాకు 1 2 3 వచ్చింది అనుకో, ఇప్పుడు ఏం చేస్తున్నాను, హైట్ మెథడ్ కాల్ చేస్తున్నాను, ఇక్కడ 4 5 6 వచ్చింది. అప్పుడు ఏం జరుగుతుంది, 1 2 3 మల్టిప్లై 4 5 6. సో ఒక రిజల్ట్ వచ్చింది సంథింగ్, సో లైక్ 7 8 9 ఒక రిజల్ట్ వచ్చింది అనుకుందాం. అప్పుడు 7 8తో ఇక్కడ ఏదైతే రిజల్ట్ వస్తుందో దాంతో మల్టిప్లై అవుతుంది. దాని తర్వాత వచ్చిన రిజల్ట్ మళ్ళీ ఈ ప్రాపర్టీలో ఉన్న వాల్యూతో మల్టిప్లై అవుతుంది. ఫైనల్గా వచ్చేది ఈ అవుట్పుట్. సో ఇది ద ఫైనల్గా రిజల్ట్ ఇయర్. సో ఈ వాల్యూమ్ అనేది ఈ బాక్స్ వెయిట్ యొక్క వాల్యూమ్ ఇయర్. సో ఈ బాక్స్ వెయిట్లో ఉన్న ప్రాపర్టీస్ అన్నిటిని మల్టిప్లై చేస్తే వచ్చిన రిజల్ట్ ఇది. ఇంకేమన్నా క్వశ్చన్సా? Okay. So now what I will do, now we identify this particular example, multi-level hierarchy. This is one of the important example. So if you understand this particular example, we can easily understand how this particular objects are creating internally and how this particular constructors are calling internally. Okay. So what I will do, I'm going to define the one more example. So to identify how this particular constructors are going to call internally. Okay. So this is another important example we are discussing here. So let me define the classes here. So inside this particular package, I'm going to define the constructor related classes here. So CON. So CON basically it is a constructor. I'm trying to define as a constructor A. Okay. Inside this particular constructor A, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to define the default constructor. I'm not going to provide any information, just will define the default constructor. So how we can define this default constructor? And I'm going to make as a public here. So constructor A. Okay, so now what I'm doing here I'm trying to define the default constructor, and inside this particular default constructor, just I'm adding the message. So this particular message, it will give you when this particular constructor is going to call. Okay, so observe carefully. What is the message I'm trying to write? So inside C1 like a constructor, yeah. Okay, so this is the inside constructor A, it is called here. Now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to save this particular constructor A class, and again I'm going to make the relation here. So how I'm going to make the relation? Something like constructor B I'm trying to create here, and inside this particular constructor B I'm trying to extend this particular constructor A. So whenever I'm trying to extend this particular constructor A, what I'm doing it, again I'm trying to create a constructor. So the name of the constructor, something like constructor B, and here I'm going to modify the message here. Okay, so this is the class I'm creating, constructor B, and one more class I'm going to create, something like constructor C. So once I define this particular constructor C, what I will do, I will try to extend this constructor B. Okay, after this particular constructor B, public constructor C, and I'm defining the message here, something like constructor C. Okay, now what you understand this hierarchy, whatever the hierarchy we discuss here, it's like a same hierarchy. So here we define the constructor A as a super class, and we define as a constructor B, this particular class is a intermediate class, and constructor C. Okay, so see the hierarchy. Now this is the hierarchy we are going to use here. Okay, so this is the super class we are going to call, and this is the intermediate class, and this particular class is a subclass here. Now what I will do, I'm going to create an object of this particular constructor C. Otherwise we cannot call the default constructor. So let's understand this particular example, how I'm going to create. So I'm going to use this particular same whatever the main class we are using it. So using this particular main class, I'm going to create a object here. And here I'm not doing anything here. Okay, so simply the constructor C I'm calling here. Getting the point? So this is the new operator we are creating here. Like we are trying to create an object. Along with the object here, I'm trying to call the default constructor. Whenever I'm calling this particular default constructor, so we need to understand how the constructors are calling internally. Okay, how this particular constructors are calling internally. Now understand here. I'm going to run this particular example. So let's observe carefully. Now what you understand here? So which class is taken highest to priority here? Getting the point? Which class is taken highest to priority, and later which class is taking highest to priority? So by seeing this particular message, now what you are understanding? So could you please help me, like what you are trying to understand? So whatever the message we have seen inside this particular console.
First priority is goes to super class, then intermediate class, and then base class.
Yes, correct. So now what you understand is, so it is giving the priority to the topmost superclass. Later it is moving into the intermediate class, and later it is moving into the subclasses, right? So same way, whenever we are trying to discuss about the earlier shipment dot value method. Okay, so whatever the value method I'm called here, so this particular value method also it will try to look up the same hierarchy. But here the constructor, how it is calling, it will not look basically, the methods will look little bit different here. Basically, if the method is no longer available in the constructor C, it will go to this particular constructor B. Getting the point? If method is available, it will execute this. Otherwise, now it will go to this particular constructor A. But constructor, how it is executing? So whenever we are calling this particular constructor C, now it is giving the option to call the constructor B. Now the constructor B is not executing here. Now again, what happening internally? It is giving the option to execute the superclass constructor. How we are having the relation? And here we are having the relation call, whatever the extents we use here. Okay, in this particular two cases, we define the extents here. Whenever we are making this particular extents keyword, what happening internally, it is trying to look up the, like it is giving the option to call the superclass object first. Now what you understand, first it will create the superclass object. First it will create the superclass object, later it will create the intermediate class object, and finally it will call this particular subclass object. But whenever we are calling the properties here, like properties is nothing but variable as well as method. The variable and method, first it will take the highest priority, this subclass. Okay, for method calling, it will take highest priority of this particular subclass. If the method is not available, then only it will go to this particular intermediate class. So see the differences. So this is the highest priority. Now I'm going to make as 100%. But for the constructor calling, for this particular constructor calling, so the superclass will take as a highest priority. That is called 100%. It is going to give to the priority to the superclass. For method purpose or property purpose, the child class only it will take care. Okay, this is we need to understand here. Getting the point? This is we need to understand this particular example. So this will call it as a multi-level hierarchy. Okay, so this is very important example we are discussing, the multi-level inheritance. Okay, and earlier we discussed about the simple inheritance. So we discussed the two inheritance here, like we are going to discuss two more inheritance here. Okay, so based on our understanding, I'm going to explain the two more inheritance. So any questions so regarding this particular simple inheritance as well as the multi-level inheritance here? Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, so remaining people, anyone having any question? Okay, so if you don't have anything, now I'm going to discuss one of the another important concept called method overriding. So basically, what exactly the method overriding is going to work. So first we need to understand the method overloading. Method overloading, basically what we need to understand, the name of the method is same and only the type of the parameters we are going to modify. Like so we'll define the different data type as well as we are going to define the different the like order here. The type of order we are going to provide differently here. Okay, so same way, now I'm going to discuss about the method overriding here. How this particular method overriding is going to work. So I will explain the simple example. Later we can easily understand how this particular method overriding concept is going to work internally. Okay, let me create a one classes here. The name of the class I'm trying to create again. So carefully observe, I'm trying to write method override A class. Method override A class I'm defining. Okay, so this is the naming convention. It will give you the more understanding how this particular the method overriding concept is going to work. And carefully observe here now what I'm doing here. Okay, I'm going to make private properties here. So I don't want to define the private like properties as a public here. And now what you need to understand here, I'm going to define the constructor. So what is the constructor? I'm going to define something like method override A, and this particular constructor will take as a 2 parameters. So what are all the 2 parameters I'm trying to pass here? Int A comma int B. Okay, observe carefully. Here I'm trying to define this. Okay, now observe carefully. What I'm doing here, I'm trying to define this particular method overriding constructor, and which is expecting 2 parameters, int A comma int B, and I is equals to A and J is equals to B. Getting the point? So I'm trying to initializing the value, and here the another method I'm trying to define something called show method. Something called show method I'm calling here, and this particular show method will display the I and J values. Okay, so I and values here. Okay, what we need to understand here, I'm trying to add. Here I'm going to define J here. Okay, so this is the way I'm trying to define the I and J values. Getting the point? This is the way I'm going to define the I and J values. Now, what you need to understand here, I'm going to copy this particular example, and I'm going to create one more class. So this is the method override B class I'm trying to create, and this particular B class internally, it is trying to extend from the method overriding here. And whenever we are trying to override here, so why I'm getting an error? Getting the point? Whenever I'm trying to extend this particular method overriding A, now I'm getting an error here. Getting the point? The method override B class is giving me an error. Any idea why it is giving me an error here?
Here variable we are using private.
Okay. What happens if I'm going to use the private variables? Any issue here?
Within a class only it will declare.
But here I'm not using any variables information, right?
Yes.
But how it is giving me an error? Okay. So what I need to explain basically, what is the constructor we define here? This particular constructor is expecting 2 parameters. Okay, this particular constructor is expecting 2 parameters. Okay, now the compiler cannot provide the 2 parameters constructor to this particular class. Why it cannot provide the 2 parameters constructor? Because compiler cannot understand what kind of the data we are going to pass to this particular constructor. But observe carefully, if I'm not adding this, so simply I'm going to comment out this particular constructor. Okay, just I'm trying to comment out this particular constructor here. Now you can see any error we are getting here. We are not getting any error. So here, why we are not getting any error? This is important here. Getting the point? Now what you need to understand here, this particular method override class, so it's the compiler will generate the default constructor. Okay, if I'm not specifying any constructor, compiler will provide the default constructor. But whenever we are trying to providing any constructor like this, for example, I'm going to comment out again here. Now I will explain this particular default constructor here. So here I'm going to define method override A, and this is basically, it is a default constructor that we already identified here. So I don't want to explain one more time. Now you can see, even for this particular default constructor, I'm not getting any error. Only why I'm getting for this particular parameters constructor. Getting the point? By default, compiler will generate the constructor like this. If you are not adding, like if you are adding also, for this particular subclasses will generate the default constructor. But the problem here, whenever we are trying to generate the parameterized constructor. Okay, whenever we are trying to generate this particular parameterized constructor, what happens internally? It is going to throw an error. But now if you observe carefully, Now if you observe carefully, I am not getting any error right now. Even I added two constructors here. Two constructors. Like first one is the default constructor and the second one is a parameterized constructor. But here I'm not getting any error here. Why? Compiler is trying to treat as a default constructor. For this particular method override B, compiler is going to generate the default constructor here. So this is very important information we need to understand. Now what I will do, I'm going to comment out the default constructor. Now it is giving me an error because we need to explicitly provide the parameterized constructor. So let's see, I'm going to generate this. Now you can see, so what happening internally, it is trying to generate the constructor which is expecting two parameters, and internally we are calling this particular superclass. So what I will do, instead of calling this particular superclass, I'm going to provide one parameter, like one property here. Okay, so simply I'm going to provide as a int k. Okay, so private int k, and this particular constructor, now what I'm doing is I'm going to provide one more parameter, something like c, and we are going to call the superclass constructor. Now finally I'm calling it, so this we don't need, so k is equals to c. Okay, so whatever the k value we defined here, and with help of this particular k value I'm initializing whatever the c value we are going to get here. Okay, so this is important, we need to understand. But observe carefully, here I am going to write same method. Okay, here I am going to write the same method, whatever the same method we define inside this particular method override a class. What is the method we defined here? So something like show method. Here I am trying to define the show method, and I'm going to copy this and I will try to define same method inside this particular method overriding B. And whenever I'm trying to define here, now what happening internally, so I'm getting an error. So this is we already identified because I'm trying to access the private properties. So I'm not going to access this values here, and here I'm going to access k value. Okay, so whenever I'm trying to access this particular k value, now this is important here. So this is important. So carefully observe, in the two classes like method overriding A, I'm having the same method, and inside this particular method overriding B, again I'm having same method. So whenever I'm trying to create an object here, so which method it is going to call? Getting the point? This is important here. Whenever I'm trying to create object of this particular method overriding here, which object, like which method it is going to call? Either this particular show method which is available inside this particular method overriding B, or this particular method overriding A method is going to call. So this is important, we need to understand. Now what I'm doing here, I'm going to comment out this particular the constructor example. I'm going to create the method override whatever we defined here. Okay, so here I'm trying to create method overriding B, and something like so mob and method override, whatever the method override B we are having, I'm calling this. Now what we need to understand here, so this is expecting three parameters. So I will give you as a 45, and the second one 78 I'm giving, and the third one I'm trying to give as a 96 here. Okay, so these are all the three parameters I'm providing. Now so mob dot the show method I'm calling. So could you please explain me, so which show method it is going to call? Which
Method
class show?
override
So method override.
B class.
So why it will not call the method override A class here? So why this particular method is not going to call? Why this method only it is going to call here?
We have created object based on the method override B, right?
Okay, so whenever we are trying to create this particular the hierarchy, now what happening internally, whatever the method we define inside this particular class, the method is hiding here. Getting the point? The method override A class, whatever the method we are having, the method is hiding, and here highest priority this particular method is going to take. Whatever the method is available inside this particular subclass, the method is going to take. So let me run this example. So we'll understand this, how it is executing. Now you can see it is printing only k value. Okay, if it is printing the k value, now what we need to understand is, so you can see this is the k value, the message we added. And inside the which class we added? Something like inside this particular method override B. Getting the point. Now, what we need to understand basically, so this is method overriding A, and this is method overriding B, and this is also having show method, and this particular calls the method overriding B also having show method. And here, this class, this method is taking highest priority. Okay, when this method is going to take highest priority, this method is hiding here. This method is hiding it. So if you are defining this particular method, but this method is not using here. Remember, this method is not using. But whenever we are calling this, I want to call this particular method also. So what is the best way of calling here? Whenever I'm calling the subclass method, from the subclass method, I want to call the superclass method. Now observe carefully. So what is the best way to call here? And what is the keyword we can use? Again we need to use the same super keyword. So super dot, what is the method I'm trying to call here? Show method. But observe carefully, if I'm going to write this after this particular statement here, any error I'm getting here? Any error I'm getting basically? This is important here. No, we are not getting any error. But now observe, if I'm going to copy this and if I'm trying to paste it outside of this particular line number 7, but here we are getting an error. Getting the point? Here we are getting an error here. So why we are getting? For this particular constructor related information, super is expecting first executable statement. Getting the point? The super is expecting first executable statement. But same way, whenever I'm trying to define this particular method, even after this particular first executable statement, now it is not giving any compilation error. Now what we will do, we'll run the same example. Now observe carefully what happening internally. The first two, the subclass show method is calling, and later the superclass I and j method is calling here. Getting the point? So this is important here. So instead of making this particular method as a hiding, what we are doing is from this particular subclass, using this particular super keyword, using this particular super dot, whatever the method we are having, I'm going to call this particular method here. Okay, so this is a way of calling the superclass show method. So any question? So this particular concept basically we'll call it as a method overriding. Whenever we are trying to override this particular method, the superclass method should be like it is in the hidden status. So the method is we are not going to use anywhere, even if the subclass method is available. The same example here we can go for the value. Here we can go for the same value method. Inside this particular box class we are having, and the same method we define inside this particular box weight. The highest priority every time it is going to this particular box weight, and whenever the box weight value method is calling internally, the box class method is hiding here. Okay, so it is in the empty status. This particular method we are not using here. Only even whenever we are trying to create with the multiple object, the subclass method only it is calling. Okay, the subclass method it is calling here. Now what we need to understand here, this particular concept also will try to call the method overriding concept here. Okay, so this is important, we need to understand here. So here we discuss about the two important example here, like first one is a volume and the second one is this particular show. So these two methods comes under the method overriding concept here. Okay, so this is so note basically I am trying to prepare the PPT, so it's going to take more like a 5 or 6 days. I will give you the end of this particular our concept. So right now you can go through the recorded session so far what we are discussing here, and you can practice the the example what we are discussing here. Like end of this particular core Java, I will provide the note, so you can go through the notes and you can read what exactly the each and every concept is going to work. Okay, so I'm trying to prepare the core Java notes, so it's going to take some more days here. Okay, so any questions regarding about this particular method overriding concept here? So we'll try to extend this particular method overriding concept so little bit in our tomorrow also. Okay, Sai, నీకు ఏమైనా questions ఉన్నాయా? Okay, so if we don't have anything, now I'm going to upload this particular session. Now you can go through the method overriding concept as well as whatever this particular multi-level hierarchy we discuss here, and we'll try to continue the same example tomorrow. And most of the time, like tomorrow or day after tomorrow, we'll try to complete the inheritance concept. So once we complete this particular inheritance concept here, the basic core Java concepts we are completed here. Basic core Java concept is nothing but if I'm going to open any predefined class, so you are going to understand so what is the class's structure it is created internally. Okay, so that we need to understand very carefully here. So that's the reason what I'm suggesting here. Try to go through all the recorded videos so far what we discuss here. So try to practice like 1 to 2 times here, so that you will get to know what happening internally inside the basic concepts here. Okay, so if we don't have anything, so tomorrow we'll continue the same continuation, the inheritance example.
Sir, that collection concepts also comes in core Java, right?
Yes, I'm going to cover the collections also.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Okay, so we'll continue tomorrow.